It's 5:04 and welcome into a Monday edition of the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. I'm Nick Craig. Good Monday morning to you. A busy day today, MLK Day, also Inauguration Day 2025. We turn our attention to Washington, D.C. this morning, where inauguration plans did change late in the day on Friday. That is due to blistering cold temperatures that are expected in Washington, D.C. President-elect, soon-to-be President Donald Trump, said that he'll be sworn in and deliver his inauguration address inside the Capitol Rotunda. This is due to very cold temperatures in D.C., where it is currently 25 degrees. There is a cold weather advisory that is in effect for that area right now as we head throughout the morning with the wind gust temperatures, or at least the feel-like temperature is set to be in the mid-teens, so a very cold day in Washington, D.C. Due to that change, the vast majority of ticketed guests that may have secured and gotten those tickets for the inauguration are unfortunately unable to attend. That's according to the Joint Inaugural Committee, which is run by a bipartisan group of Republicans and Democrats. With that, however, the Capital One Arena will be open today for a live viewing of the event and host the presidential parade. Trump has said that after he finishes his events over at the Capitol Rotunda, he will make his way to Capital One and address the crowd there. In a statement, the U.S. Capitol Police said that ticketed outside areas on the west front of the Capitol are set to be closed, so you will not be able to just go and hang out in front of the Capitol. Capitol Police and other law enforcement agencies are working to secure the inauguration, as they say that they will still have a heightened level of security, even though those outdoor events are not sent to happen. Crews were seen building the new inauguration stage in the Capitol Rotunda on Friday afternoon. In an email to House offices, the House Sergeant-at-Arms on Friday asked congressional offices to tell constituents who had been given tickets that they are now commemorative, since the majority of those will no longer be able to watch the proceedings in person. And from what I learned on Saturday, speaking to a couple members of Congress up at the North Carolina inaugural ball, pretty much the only individuals inside the Capitol Rotunda are going to be Trump's very close family members and relatives, as well as members of Congress. That is essentially it. So a much smaller viewing crowd inside the limited size of the Capitol Rotunda. That is set to go on a little bit later on today. Coverage throughout the day, including the inaugural address right here on News Talk 1110 and 99.3 WBT. It's now 5:07. You're listening to the Carolina Journal News Hour. We are discussing a new federal rule this morning coming out of NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and it could have a major impact in North Carolina in regards to our very, very important marine and fishery industry. To get some additional details on that this morning, it's my pleasure to welcome Teresa Opeka from CarolinaJournal.com to discuss. Teresa, especially in the eastern half of the state, fishing and that whole industry is massive business for North Carolina. It affects the entire state. What's the latest that you're tracking on this new NOAA rule?
Sure. So actually some good news that came down last week. It was that rule proposed by NOAA, as you mentioned. It would have had a devastating effect and blow to businesses and tourism along the whole eastern seaboard, all the way from Massachusetts to Florida. That's including North Carolina. It was withdrawn last week by the National Marine Fisheries Service. I'm not sure how, I guess they all work together with NOAA, but it was actually withdrawn. It was supposed to restrict vessels greater or equal to 35 feet and less than 65 feet in length to 10 knots. That's roughly 11 miles per hour. That's as fast as you'd be able to go along much of the eastern seaboard during the whales migration and calving season that would occur from November to May. So if that was put into place, you'd be looking at thousands of registered boats. There were 384,000 registered boats in North Carolina. It would have an impact on it goes all the way from fishing to private fishing, fishing tournaments to boat sales, anything related to, doing business along the coast, and also like to restaurants and things of that nature. Like people are stopping in or they're getting gas or whatever. It would have had a huge, huge blow. It actually, total figure for North Carolina would have been $89.1 billion.
Well, yeah, I mean, you think about driving your car at 11 miles an hour. It's not all that fast. You
No.
imagine you're out in the ocean, Teresa, and in this case you're a mid-sized, mid-range commercial fisher, not a huge industry, but a small business, a couple of guys on a boat, and you're now stuck in that huge time span, as you noted, from November until May, going at just 11 miles an hour. You're talking about adding potentially hours to your day's commute back and forth. It's completely impractical, especially for small business.
Oh, absolutely. I talked to a fisherman last year about this rule, and that's what he said. It would add so much time to his commute back and forth every day that it wouldn't be worth it. He would be losing tons and tons of money. And he had people, even already cancel before this rule was even, it was being discussed. He said people are like, hey, I'm not going to give you all this money and put the time and effort into it. I'm just going to cancel my trip. So, I mean, it's very good news for all of these people who do the business along the coast.
Yeah, and referring to that fisher that you spoke with last year, anybody that's ever done a boat charter, you do 4 or 5 hours on a charter. That includes the travel time to get out to your fishing spot. You're going a couple miles offshore at 11 miles an hour, Teresa. You're talking about more than half of that whole time that you booked just sitting in the boat waiting and putzing along at 11 miles an hour. Now, however, obviously it is a concern. You don't want these boaters striking these whales and potentially damaging or killing them. However,
Sure.
you've got to be able to balance those things, and it didn't really seem like that rule did that, at least as it was originally proposed.
No, no, it didn't. It didn't. And like what they've talked about before is like there is, equipment out there. There's sonar equipment. There's different equipment that is in place already, and they're developing new equipment all the time where they can detect whales of this nature, or whales in general along the coast. So they already have that in place, and they're making strides in getting better equipment put into place as well. In fact, there have been the restrictions for, like, say, wind power off in the ocean and stuff like that. They were granted exemptions last year for a lot of the same thing that was facing the boating industry. So it's like, well, if they're getting exemptions, why not, the boating industry? It didn't make any sense. They're not killing that many whales, but of course it is important. Nobody wants to kill or damage the boat, any of that nature. So it's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, and of course, there were a whole bunch of stories last year with, especially on the New Jersey coast, is where it was really prominent, of all of these whales washing up alongshore dead, and it was exclusively pointed at the offshore wind industry that was booming off of the Jersey coast. Now, Teresa, today's a big day, Monday, Inauguration Day. The new administration is coming in just a couple of hours. You mentioned that NOAA has withdrawn this rule. Do you suspect it's essentially dead at this point? Can you envision that the Trump administration or his folks are likely to bring something like this up, or are we done talking about it?
I don't think that they will. However, what was noted in this press release was put out last week is that don't count any further action not being taken. That is according to NOAA. They still have reserve the right to do something in the future. But I think it would be highly unlikely under the Trump administration that would come about.
Great update this morning. We appreciate it. Teresa Opeka from CarolinaJournal.com joins us on the Carolina Journal News Hour. And you can read more on that story by visiting our website, CarolinaJournal.com. It's now 5:13, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. It's time to get a look at traffic on this Monday morning with Boomer Von Cannon.
Hey, thanks. Emergency Situation Station.
Huh? It's 5:20. Welcome back to a Monday edition of the Carolina Journal News Hour. It's News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. Well, I've got some bad news for North Carolina homeowners this morning, as your insurance rates will increase on average by 15% across the Tar Heel State over the next 2 years. However, if you're looking for a silver lining, that's significantly lower than the average of more than 42% that was requested by the North Carolina Rate Bureau, the NCRB. North Carolina Insurance Commissioner Mike Causey announced Friday morning that his office and the Rate Bureau signed an agreement that would see the average statewide base rate increase by 7.5% on June the 1st of this year, 2025, and another 7.5% on June the 1st, 2026. With that, the North Carolina Rate Bureau represents homeowner insurance companies here in North Carolina. We've got to turn the clock back almost 12 months to a request that was made in January of 2024. During that time, a multitude of homeowners and others from across the state voiced their concern in what was a very popular public comment period, which began on January the 22nd of last year, as individuals, rightfully so, and as you can imagine, very much frustrated with seeing that their insurance could go up by 42%. As expected, no one was in favor of the increase, which could have seen rates in some coastal areas like Swansboro and Onslow County as high as 71%. And listen to this, places like Emerald Isle could have seen their homeowners insurance rates go up by 99%. Yes, 99% in the request made by the North Carolina Rate Bureau. Those in the mountains were expected to see the lowest increase between 4 and 20%, although that number may change with the context of extreme flooding and complete and total devastation and destruction from Hurricane Helene. According to Causey in a press release on Friday, he says the insurance companies want to raise our homeowners rates by up to 99.4% in some areas and an average of 42% statewide in a single year. I fought for the consumer and knocked them back to 7.5% increases over 2 years with a maximum of 35% in any territory. We consider this settlement a big win for both homeowners and for North Carolina. In addition, the agreement prohibits the Rate Bureau from undertaking an effort to increase rates again until June of 2027. So that's the next time that they could do that request, and it could potentially go through a lengthy process. We saw, in this case, literally a calendar year from when the Rate Bureau made their initial request until the legal proceedings took place, until this settlement from Causey announced on Friday. So potentially not until sometime in 2028 or 2029 until we saw something like this again. According to Causey, in an interview 2 weeks ago with Carolina Journal, he said, "We've been in court since October 7th, and it's been a grueling process. It's a hardship not only for our staff, but I've heard for a lot of complaints from the Rate Bureau and the insurance industry about the cost. That's something back during the campaign that my opponent was attacking me on when he called me, quote, rate hype Mike, comments and saying that I'm not transparent. Well, that's the furthest thing from the truth, because there's a process that has to be followed no matter who the commissioner is, and the public comment period is something that we always have." That's what Causey told us over at Carolina Journal last week. Commissioner Causey said that once they find out about a proposed rate hike, they notify the press and ask for public comment. Most, if not all, say that they didn't want their rates to be raised. When that occurs by state law, the insurance commissioner sets up a court hearing date about 10 months out. In the meantime, as granted by state law, the insurance commissioner can negotiate settlements if the insurance industry is willing to enter into some sort of negotiations. When settlements were negotiated, he said that they had been favorable to consumers. That means a win for consumers and the state, which can also save on those court costs of a lengthy hearing. This time, however, both sides were so far apart that he told the Carolina Journal that they could not make any progress in those out-of-court negotiations. He told Carolina Journal, the North Carolina Rate Bureau came back telling me it's costing them more than $5,000 an hour in court, saying that he told them you could spend $1 to $2 million in a court case and come out far worse than you can do if you reach some sort of settlement. He said, I hope that we'll have a public announcement in the next week or two as to where we are. That was back 2 weeks ago when he spoke to Carolina Journal. And obviously that rate is out now. So again, recapping that story for individuals across the state, you are going to be looking at an average of a 15% increase over the next 2 years, 7.5 over each of those 2 years, as we dive down and look at some various areas across the state, because again, this is an average. Both areas in Raleigh and Durham, they are at that average, 7.5%. As we look at some areas around the Charlotte area, actually some larger increases. Both the city of Charlotte, Mecklenburg, and Union counties, you will see a 9.3% increase this year, followed by a 9.2% increase next year. So, and when you're looking at that final total there, you're looking at about close to a 20% increase over that 2-year period. Obviously, the mountain areas, while they were so heavily hit, they are not seeing any of those major increases. And as we look at the biggest rates that will be increased within the state, well, that surrounds areas in southeastern North Carolina. Well, they will see a more than 10% increase over both of those years, according to this press release from Mike Causey's office. However, this is the process, and you're going to see those insurance rates increase starting June the 1st of 2025, and then you'll be hit again in 2026. You can look at the entire list of these. It breaks it down by zip codes in various areas by heading on over to our website this morning. It's carolinajournal.com. The article this morning reads, NC homeowners insurance rates to rise 15% over the next 2 years. And you can click a link there to view the entire list and see exactly what is going to happen with your insurance rates. Well, as we already mentioned earlier this morning, some changes coming to the inauguration for President-elect Donald Trump due to blistering cold temperatures forecast in Washington, D.C. The outdoor inauguration address is moving indoors. Trump will be sworn in and deliver his inaugural address inside the Capitol Rotunda starting just after noon today. For individuals that are in Washington, D.C. and hope to view the event in person throughout the mall and on the lawn of the Capitol, well, that is not going to be taking place. However, the Capital One Arena will be open to select individuals. Doors open there at 7 o'clock this morning for individuals. The president has noted that after he finishes his address inside the Capitol Rotunda, he will make his way over to the Capital One Arena to address supporters. That will be taking place a little bit later on this afternoon. Continued coverage throughout the day right here on News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT, where it's now 5:28. You're listening to the Carolina Journal News Hour. We'll get another look at traffic on this Monday morning with Boomer Von Cannon.
Thank you, Nick.
It's 5:35. Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. Well, TikTok has resumed service to its nearly 170 million users in the United States after President-elect Donald Trump said he would issue an executive order to give the app a new 90-day timeline when he takes office a little bit later on in the day today. On Saturday evening, the Chinese-owned app stopped working for American users with a message saying that it was no longer allowed to work in America. This is after a Supreme Court decision came out on Friday that banned it on national security grounds. That came into effect. Trump, who had previously backed a ban of the platform, promised on Sunday to delay the implementation of the law and allow more time for a deal to be made. TikTok then said that it was in the process of restoring its service. Soon after that, probably about midday or so yesterday, the app started working again, and a pop-up message to its nearly 170 million users thanked Trump by name. In a statement, the company thanked the incoming president for, quote, providing the necessary clarity and assurances, end quote, and said it would work with Trump on a long-term solution that keeps TikTok operational here in the United States. On Friday, the United States Supreme Court upheld a law banning the social media platform unless the company severs ties with its Chinese parent company, ByteDance. The law was scheduled to take effect on Sunday, and as I mentioned, TikTok was shut down on late Saturday night, even before midnight on Sunday. With that, North Carolina is one of the states that has had a growing wave of taking action against TikTok amid broad concerns over national security and data privacy. Then Attorney General, now Governor Josh Stein, has also dealt with the issue, filing a lawsuit in October of accusing TikTok of violating state consumer protection laws. He said that by exposing minors to harmful content and deceptive practices. Back in 2023, here in North Carolina, a state legislative committee advanced a ban on the platform from state-owned devices. Senator Tom Moffitt of Henderson County was the primary sponsor of Senate Bill 83, which also banned the platform on devices associated with the state school and university system. An amendment to it also barred a Russian product known as Telegram and a Chinese platform known as WeChat. Lawmakers saw it as a step to safeguard sensitive information from potential foreign interference. The bill unanimously passed the Senate in 2023. However, it was not taken up in the House, and it was essentially died and was relegated to the House Rules Committee. So this is something that is still changing at a pretty rapid rate. However, TikTok is back online, and we are expecting nearly 200 executive orders from the Trump administration today. One of them supposedly going to be some additional action on TikTok. We'll have those details coming up for you tomorrow morning right here on the Carolina Journal News Hour, where it's now 5:38. As we look at different generations and how they vote politically, we've got some new information this morning on the Carolina Journal News Hour about Gen Z. Where will they fall on the political spectrum compared to liberal or conservative? To get some more details on that this morning, it's my pleasure to welcome Brianna Kramer from CarolinaJournal.com to the News Hour this morning. Seems like every time we have this new generation name, whether it be Gen Z, Y, X, Boomer, whatever generation we want to use, Brianna, they tend to have a core political leanings. What are we learning about this youngest generation?
Yeah, so we took a look at the data on the State Board of Elections website to determine what exactly is going on in the youngest voter registration group. And it looks like the political leanings among young North Carolina voters have indicated a shift towards more conservative viewpoints, as Republican registrations among 18 to 25-year-olds grew significantly between 2020 and 2024, while at the same time, Democrats have seen a decline in Gen Z voters over the same period. So what it looks like from the data is that Gen Z is trending more conservative, And that really comes amid a surplus of alternative media sources that we are seeing, and access to different viewpoints online and on social media. There's a lot of different resources that Gen Z has that different generations haven't had access to. And so it just indicates that maybe Gen Z's looking at things a little differently than other generations have in the past.
And I'm glad you brought up social media. I think it's fair to assume the younger you are, the more likely you are to not only just use social media as a passer-buyer, but probably be more engaged in that conversation online. We've seen some major shifts over at X, what used to be Twitter, with Elon Musk's purchase. There's some rumblings and some conversation about changes over at Meta, Facebook, with Mark Zuckerberg. So it does seem like if individuals are wanting to get some of this content that maybe in years past was shadow banned or removed from the platform, Brianna, it seems like some of that stuff might actually be available now.
Oh, that certainly is the case. But it's also interesting when you look at the demographics a little bit between men and women. So just to break down the numbers a little bit more for everyone, Republican voter registrations among this age group, 18 to 25, showed a net gain of 10,912 young Republicans over that 4-year span from 2020 to 2024. And that includes 17,400 young men and then 5,000 young women. That contributed to the growth, while there was also a decline from undisclosed voters. But all in all, about 10,900 new young Republicans. And like I just mentioned, a vast majority of young men, actually. So that's a driving cause, is men in this age group. And so we also looked at the Democrat side, I should point out, in this age group, and that decreased by 39,000 total.
Wow.
So Republicans went up about 11,000, Democrats down 39,000 for Gen Z voters. So very interesting overall. But again, back to the men versus women, it just looks like social media, the times we're living in now, it's important to also remember this generation was in high school and college during COVID, and had to deal with lockdowns and mask mandates, and I think saw a lot more government involvement or community involvement around them because of stuff like that, a health emergency. And so there's been a lot of different impacts, of course, on how they may be trending more conservative. But for men in particular, social media, and when you look at podcasts, I think that's another interesting thing to bring up. Shows like Joe Rogan, who he predominantly appeals to men, especially young men, and that could definitely be a driving force as well in this shift in ideology among young voters.
Well, and you look at some of the guests that Joe Rogan has had on over the last couple of months, individuals like Elon Musk, like J.D. Vance, Trump himself, back just a couple of weeks ago, Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook and Meta. So I guess it makes sense that if some of these younger men are predominantly listening to shows like Joe Rogan, that's where they're falling into. What do you think? There's this term that was used a lot, and it's not as popular anymore, Brianna, but there was this idea of toxic masculinity, right? If you are a young man, inherently that you have this toxic masculinity that you bring to every conversation and every room that you step in. You think that plays into this as well? These younger men are just sick of being immediately deemed bad or not in favor because they just happen to be a man. You think that plays into it as well?
Yeah, I certainly would think that would play a role in changing their outlook, because they've been hearing that for years on end. And so, maybe that appealed to females on the left. And for years, maybe that was a talking point of toxic masculinity. But that also had a direct response. Then you can see that from men, and young men are, kind of showing through this data that maybe that's not working out so well, because that's just not coming off in a way that they are happy about. And so they're reacting and going to the conservative side because they don't want to be seen as some evil, toxic masculinity talking point from the left. So I think that definitely plays a role into why maybe they might be banding together more, this age group and men in general, in kind of like a show of response to what has been leading up to this for years.
You've got some quotes as well as some of those graphs with numbers that we were talking about. Where do folks keep up to date? Where can they read that this morning?
Yeah, just head on over to carolinajournal.com and you can look at the chart and see all of the data in the article.
Brianna Kramer joins us this morning on the Carolina Journal News Hour. Where it's now 5:45, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. It's time to get another look at traffic this morning with Boomer Von Cannon.
Hey, thanks.
station.
It's 5:52. Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. Got some unfortunately bad news for homeowners in North Carolina this morning. You are set to see an average of a 15% increase in your homeowner's insurance rates over the next 2 years. However, the silver lining is that is significantly lower than the nearly 42.5% statewide hike that was originally proposed by the North Carolina Rate Bureau. Insurance Commissioner Mike Causey announced a settlement with the Rate Bureau on Friday, limiting the increase average statewide to 7.5% in 2024 and another 7.5% in 2026, or I should say 2025 and 2026, with a maximum increase of 35% for any region across the state. The agreement prevents further rate hike action before June of 27. However, the initial proposal, which was submitted almost a year ago, January of last year, did face widespread public opposition, as you can imagine, particularly in coastal areas where rates could have soared upwards of 99%. Mountain regions previously forecasted to see 4 to 20% increases may still experience adjustments due to recent flooding. We'll see how that plays out in the years to come. The insurance commissioner and Mike Causey emphasized the settlement as a victory for homeowners, saving them approximately $777 million in premiums compared to the original request brought forward by the Rate Bureau. He noted that the agreement ensures that insurance companies maintain sufficient funds to cover claims from natural disasters and rising reinsurance costs while avoiding costly court battles that did not take place. The insurance commissioner's office did release a full PDF that shows pretty much every region across the state and how their rates are going to increase. So we look at our state capital, the cities of Durham and Raleigh, as well as Wake and Durham counties. They will be on that average of 7.5%. However, we look at the city of Charlotte, Mecklenburg, and Union County. Those rates are a little bit higher, 9.3% in June of 2025 and 9.2% in June of 2026. As we look at this across the state, both Duplin and Lenoir counties, those are where the highest increases will be taking place statewide. 13.6% in 2025, followed by 13.5% in 2026. So again, that statewide average is about 7.5% over the next 2 calendar years. And you can read more and get additional details on that story this morning by visiting our website, carolinajournal.com. In some other news this morning, the National Marine Fisheries Service has withdrawn a controversial rule proposed by NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, that would have restricted vessel speeds along the eastern seaboard from Massachusetts to Florida. That would, of course, affected North Carolina. All of that to protect the endangered North Atlantic right whale. The rule targeted vessels between 35 and 65 feet in length and limited them to just 10 knots during the whale's migration season, which was is November to May. However, that did face strong opposition due to its potential economic impact. Critics, including the National Marine Manufacturers Association, argued that the rule would endanger nearly 800,000 jobs and have a nearly $84 billion impact on the $84 billion coastal economy, including the nearly $9.1 billion recreational boating industry here in North Carolina. The rule also threatened to shut down fishing tournaments, affect tourism and related businesses. With that, the public did backlash big time, with nearly 90,000 public comments coming in, highlighting concerns over flawed assumptions, inadequate differences between large commercial ships and small recreational boats, and that what they claimed is that they completely ignored modern marine technology, which makes it a lot easier to see what is below you with sonar and various radar technology. So that rule has now been withdrawn by the National Marine Fisheries Service. You can read more details on that story this morning by visiting our website, carolinajournal.com. Well, a busy day today on this Monday, January the 20th, Inauguration Day. Those ceremonies and services moved inside due to some blistering cold temperatures in Washington, D.C. We'll keep track of the inauguration today, plus all of those executive orders coming out of the Trump administration, and have those coming up for you tomorrow morning. Well, that's going to do it. WBT News is next, followed by Good Morning BT. We're back tomorrow morning starting at 5, right here on News Talk 1110 and 99.3 WBT.